Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Schroeder, your moderator today. I'm a civil rights specialist in the Community Engagement and Education Division at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I'm grateful to be with you and really looking forward to today's My Response to Hate event. Accessibility is critical, so speakers, please first identify yourselves by name before proceeding to speak and mute your microphones after you have finished speaking. We have ASL interpreters on screen, and live cart captioning is available by turning on subtitles using the CC icon on the lower part of the screen. We will also have a question and answer portion during today's session, and attendees can use the Q&A function on the lower part of the screen to type in questions for our panelists at any time. With that said, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this month's installment of our 2023 MI, spelled M-I, Response to Hate virtual campaign forum. We will have a new installment every month through September, at which time the campaign will culminate with our annual My Response to Hate conference. The spirit of the campaign was captured by our team through development of the PSA, which is to follow. Please watch.
Did you know that race is the #1 motivating factor for hate crimes in the United States?
Did you know that hate crimes against Asian Americans have increased by over 73% since 2019?
Did you know that there are state and federal laws that protect you against hate crimes and bias incidents?
The Michigan Department of Civil Rights and the Michigan Alliance Against Hate Crimes have launched the My Response to Hate campaign to inform Michiganders of hate crimes and bias incidents occurring in Michigan.
You can take action in your own way by showing love, not hate.
If you see something, say something.
Support victims. Report the incident.
Make a commitment.
My response to hate.
My response to hate.
My response to hate.
My response to hate is love.
Visit michigan.gov/MDCR for more information on hate crimes, bias incidents, and available resources.
We intend that the campaign provides you with information pertaining to hate and bias prevention that you can implement and use in your daily lives, at your places of work, in your schools, and in your communities. Now let's get right into today's topic. Today, we will be talking about enhancing police legitimacy through procedural justice. We have an incredible panel of presenters lined up for you today who will provide us with vast knowledge, insight, and information on how they're preventing hate and bias in and through law enforcement, and will share their perspectives on enhancing police legitimacy, defined as the belief that police ought to be allowed to exercise their authority to maintain order, manage conflicts, and solve problems in their communities through procedural justice, or the focus on the way police and other legal authorities interact with the public and how the characteristics of those interactions shape the public's view of the police. We welcome our first presenter, who will discuss how his department is making seismic changes in their approach to public safety. Please join me in welcoming Chief Issa Shaheen. Chief Shaheen is a 24-year veteran of the Dearborn Police Department, serving most recently as the commanding officer of the investigative division. The investigative division cleared all 12 homicide cases under Shaheen's tenure. Prior, he served as a captain in the investigative and patrol division and as a lieutenant in critical incident and community support. Between 2009 and 2013, Shaheen served as a sergeant in the tactical patrol unit and as an ATF task force officer. Chief Shaheen earned a Bachelor of Science degree cum laude in Political Science and Government and a master's degree in Homeland Security and Emergency Management, both from Eastern Michigan University. He is also a graduate of EMU's Police Staff and Command Executive Program. He looks forward to embracing a culture of transparency and accountability as leader of one of the largest police departments in Michigan. Chief Shaheen, we are grateful you could be here with us this afternoon. The floor is yours.
Chief Issa Shaheen talking. Charles, thank you for that warm and friendly introduction. Charles and I have gotten to know each other over the years through ALPAC, and who would have known when I went to that ALPAC meeting so many years ago that we'd be friends today. So it's sometimes life will introduce you to people, and I was grateful for that introduction years ago, Charles. So thank you for having me today. I'm excited. I never pass up an opportunity to kind of talk about the things that we're doing here in Dearborn. But what I really enjoy more than just me sitting here talking and sharing some of the things we do is just really the interaction. Hopefully there'll be some questions thrown my way and we can have a meaningful conversation back and forth. But again, Charles, thank you for having me. We have the first slide up, Dan. So, you know, I've had the good fortune of serving the city of Dearborn for almost 25 years. I started in July of 1998. And I was appointed chief of police January 1st of 2022 with our new mayor. And, you know, one of the things that we've done here, and I'll get to it, it really revolves around procedural justice, but I look at it from a kind of a different lens than I think other chiefs do. But when I took over as chief, obviously one of the biggest things that I wanted to do was build partnerships between ourselves and our community. And some of the things are operational deployments, right? Like, you know, I modified the way that we deployed our officers. You know, I believe it's really important that you build relationships with community members. And we had a deployment plan previous to me taking over where an officer would move around the city week to week. And I see a lot of value in having the same officer in the same neighborhood building relationships. You know, I think it's important, you know, back in the day when I took over, when I started on the street back in the late 90s and then the 2000s, you know, we worked the same neighborhood. And so I knew when a neighbor or a resident got a new Lincoln because, you know, we had relationships. You'd see it in their driveway. I also developed a neighborhood police officer program, but I'll get into that a little bit later. And it, again, it was meant to build relationships with community members. And we'll talk about that here shortly. You know, procedural justice is so critically important. And when I think of procedural justice, I think of things about, you know, being fair in your process when you do things as a police department. You know, be fair with the community, obviously, that is obvious. Be transparent in your actions when you do things. And then finally, give everyone a voice in that process, you know, so residents have a voice in the kind of police service that they receive. And then also be impartial in your decision making. Now, those are the 4 building blocks for me of procedural justice. But here's what I want to highlight for everyone listening. A lot of chiefs, and rightfully so, it's extremely important that they focus on their relationship with the community and that they use those 4 principles of procedural justice as their building blocks when interacting with the community. But what I am as equally as focused on, and I believe it needs to start internally first, it's important to me that the culture and climate within your police department have those 4 founding principles as well. And I think a lot of chiefs will they'll focus on that relationship externally with the community. And clearly that's important. But what I'm saying is as important is that you have those principles within your organization. And here's the reasons I say that. If police officers within the department don't feel trusted with their administration, if they don't feel that they'll be treated fairly with process, or if their voice doesn't matter, I can't expect them to go out then into the community and build trustful relationships with community members. So you need to lead by example internally, and you need to have a culture and climate within your organization of one that is based on those procedural justice principles. And when you do that successfully, what you will find is that you're able to build those trustful relationships, and your officers do externally with the community. And so, you know, morale, culture, climate within the organization, it's something that I take the temperature of daily. And now that doesn't mean that people aren't held accountable. I want to be very clear. Accountability and transparency are the building blocks of building trust with the community. But what I'm saying and sharing with you is that you can have a positive culture within your department, one that, espouses values of community policing and service, and you still have accountability at the top of that pyramid. But I'm very focused internally on that relationship that we have amongst each other, among the administration and the officers, so that we can then build those trustful relationships in the community. I'll share this with you. You have recruiting and retention across the country and in the state of Michigan is extremely difficult. I, including myself, have in the next budget 188 sworn members, me on down to the newest officer. I am the 4th or 5th largest municipal police department in the state of Michigan. I currently have 3 open positions. There's not another department in the state that can say that. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons that I know is that if you have a positive environment, you have a healthy work culture, bringing people to your organization becomes a lot easier. I've seen departments that will create recruiting teams, and they'll say these officers are tasked with going out and recruiting at academies or at job fairs. But what I'll tell you is that nobody's going to work for your organization if people are unhappy and it's toxic. I don't care how many recruiting officers you have. While I do have officers that are assigned to recruiting, the reality is all 188 of us are recruiting for this department, because when you're happy, when your voice matters, when you're impartial in your decision making and fair in your process internally, they're going to go out and want to recruit their friends, their neighbors, and their family members to come work for your organization. And I want to be clear, once you do that internally, I assure you it extends externally to your relationship with community members. So I know I spent a little bit of time talking about that paradigm shift for us, but it is extremely important. Now, I mentioned prior that transparency and accountability are also the building blocks of trust building. And when I took over as chief, I launched a transparency dashboard. Some of you might be familiar with it, but I firmly believe that data, the information is critical to building trust. And your community needs to understand that information is not manipulated by the police department, that the transparency dashboard is a way that any resident, any community member, any citizen can go on. You're welcome to do it while we're presenting here in another screen and put in Dearborn Police Transparency Dashboard. And what you're going to find is you have information on what your police department's doing. You can see the calls for service, what kind of runs that we respond to in a given day, a given year. It's a very robust platform that allows the user to isolate information to really understand what your police department's doing. You can see what we're pulling people over for. You're able to analyze the data and see the race, the sex, and the age of the people that are being stopped by the police and why we're stopping them. You can do the same thing for arrests and traffic data as well. And I'll get to a little bit later why that's so important, because looking at that information and coming to conversations with community members with an open heart and an open mind can lead to real positive change. The other thing that I put on there is our policies. I firmly believe that it's not my data, it's the people's data, and they should have access to it. I go out of my way to make information available to people that they would otherwise have to FOIA, so they can have it available to them. And so, all of our policies I would say 95% of them are online. There's a very small number that we kept for just operational reasons. But the reality is almost everything's available online. And so if you wonder why did the police respond the way that they do to certain events, how are they trained, that information is available to you. And then finally, crime mapping is also another tool that's available on that platform so that you can kind of see the things going on in your community. Now, I want to talk about why that data is so important. One of the things that I did when I took over as chief on January 1st of 2022, and it's nice because you really get a whole year snapshot of the paradigm shift here in our organization. When I took over, my predecessor had a policing model, folks, that believed you could lower crime through high visibility traffic enforcement. And, if you go out there and you tell a bunch of young officers to go out and find crime before it happens, there is a propensity to over police people of color and to police poverty. And how do I know this? Because I myself did the same very thing when I was the sergeant on the TAC team. And I would go out there and I would try to find crime before it happened. And I was doing exactly what I was told to do. And so I would go out there and stop a lot of cars looking for, guns and drugs so that I could make our streets safer. And the reality is when I would get a gun off the street, I would be, proud of my accomplishment. I would feel like I've just taken an illicit firearm off the street and I've just made life safer for everyone. And there might be a little bit of truth to that. But the reality is if I stopped 100 cars and got one gun off the street, in the process, I've alienated 99 people. And I know that doesn't make us safer. And I know that erodes community trust. And the reality is no matter, what your background is, your race, or what zip code you hail from, you should feel free and comfortable to travel through our city and any city for that matter. And so, what we see is if you look at the chart in front of you in 2019, you're able to analyze in a transparent way. Any community member can do this. You can see our traffic stops and why we're pulling people over. And if you can read that, what you'll see is the top reasons that we were pulling people over for, they were all non-moving violations, right? So like the third most frequent thing we stopped someone for was defective equipment. That's the kind of thing like a headlight out, a vision obstruction, a dangling ornament. You have to go all the way down like third or fourth from the bottom or fifth there to see speeding, right? 1 to 5 over. That's the first moving violation. And then below that is the only other moving violation that I see, and it's running the stop sign. All the rest of those are not moving violations. So when I went into roll calls as the new chief, I went into all of the roll calls and I said, folks, we're not going to be stopping people for those non-moving violations. Frankly, in the city of Dearborn, one of the biggest concerns for residents is hazardous driving. And so I don't have anyone that ever calls my office and says, Chief, I've got all these dangling ornaments and I want you to do something about it. What they're concerned about is hazardous moving violations, speeding, reckless driving, stop signs. And so I told our officers that I want you in the neighborhoods, stopping people for the things that matter to our residents, moving violations. And so what you can see is in very, much contrast to 2019, you look at the chart on the right side of the screen, and you're going to see that the top reasons we're pulling people over for, they're moving violations. We went from 400, almost 500 stops for speeding in 2019 to over 5,000 in 2022. And then we have stop signs, and impeding traffic, folks, means that someone was pulled over for a moving violation and was given a break. The reality is that the top reasons that we pulled people over for are all moving violations. The first time that you see defective equipment, it's now, instead of it being a moving violation that's from the, near the bottom, it's going to be defective equipment at 718. So, the reality is we stop people for driving offenses and not these minor offenses. But more importantly, what we've done is in 2019, 40% of the people that we were pulling over were people of color. In 2022, we've cut it in half. It's only 21%. That's justice, right? That is an equitable way. We've made our streets safer. We're pulling people over for things that are dangerous, that can lead to crashes and injuries. We're making our roads safer. And as important as we're policing in a more equitable way. And that's a statistic I'm very proud of. You can, a lot of times we measure crime by we measure our success by the absence of crime. But, a famous chief once said that you should also measure it more importantly by the presence of justice. And I think that's important, that for chiefs, that's kind of your guiding light when you go out there and work every day. The neighborhood police officer program is just one of the other things that we did. I recognized early on when I started going to community member or neighborhood association meetings as chief, really the major reason or the most prevalent concern for Dearborn residents are quality of life issues, right? They're not armed robberies and carjackings, but they're more concerned about, the cars that speed down their street, the loud car exhausts, the neighbor who is, doesn't take care of their property or has late night parties. Those are the things that were in most of the complaints that I would receive when I went to spoke with residents. And previous to there being this program, their only outlet was to dial 911. And when you dial 911, you're going to get a police officer who is responsible for responding to call after call after call. And very often those types of calls require more time to resolve the issue. So I created a neighborhood police officer program. And what we've done is we have 4 officers that are responsible for geographical areas of the city. Their job is a point of contact for residents and business owners to address quality of life issues. And the feedback, we launched it just here March 1st, and I wanted to do it my first year, but I had to make sure that I had staffing, operational issues worked out. But March 1st, I launched it, and the feedback in the first few months has been overwhelmingly positive. You know, they have business cards, they go out and, interact with, students and residents and business owners outside of a 911 call to address quality of life issues. One of the things I did here, and I did this years ago, when a new resident moves into the city of Dearborn, our assessor knows that there was a new home purchase, and you'll have our neighborhood police officer a couple months after you've moved into our city will visit you at the house. These are the 4 MPOs right there, Ahmed, Justin, and Matt Schiffer. But, these officers will visit you at your home, drop off their card, introduce themselves, and they'll provide you useful information that you would want to know as a new resident. Like, who do I call if my sewer water main break, or if my trash doesn't get picked up properly, or if I have concerns. And we call it Welcome to the Neighborhood. It's a Welcome to the Neighborhood packet. But, it's just another way to interact with our residents, to build relationships. And, if you see the MPOs, both Ahmed El-Azawi and Ahmed Saad read, write, and speak Arabic. As you well know, Dearborn's diverse community, that is a huge asset. And then, Justin Smith and Matt Schiffer work in areas where we have a little lower number of Arab Americans, but they themselves are representative of our community, and go a long way of building positive relationships with people. I also want to talk, look, I don't know for other communities, but I will share with you in Dearborn, we have, I know across the country, really, we have a mental health crisis, folks. Last year, we responded to 1,600 mental health calls in the city of Dearborn, and that's an exponential increase over the previous years. And, I'll be the first one to tell you that the police are not the answer for all of life's problems, right? And so what we've done is, over the years, we've defunded mental health treatment, we've defunded substance abuse programs, we've defunded after-school programs, and then, by the nature of policing, we're the state life safety net. And so when you call 911, someone will show up, and it's us. And when our officers don't handle some of these complex issues the way that they should be, I would argue that that's not what we were ever designed to do. And so there is a need for mental health services and substance abuse programs out there. There's an overwhelming need for them. And so what we've done in Dearborn is we've collaborated with some of our social service organizations to be able to serve people and provide them the help that they need. And so from a mental health perspective, we have a full-time mental health clinician on staff who works in a police car a minimum of 40 hours a week, responding to non-emergent mental health calls. And, I'm sure this won't come as a surprise, but the overwhelming majority of mental health calls, they're not dangerous. These people aren't dangerous. They just need help. Now, there's always that potential, but the reality is what they need is mental health care. They don't necessarily need a police officer in that moment, right? So we partner, Stacy Wetters, our mental health clinician, with a police officer, and really all what Landon does, the officers just stand in the background and allow the mental health professional to try to get these people the help that they need. And it's been very successful. That mental health clinician not only responds to those calls, but if we should have mental health calls after hours or over the weekends, they will then follow up their next workday to make sure that they're getting the wraparound services that they need. Also, there is a large unhoused population, in Dearborn and in other communities that I think we just drive by every day and hope that they're going to be okay. What's driving that issue? Is it economic? Is it mental health? Is it substance abuse? And so, Stacy and Landon will stop by and try to get those people the help that they need. I think communities and society are measured by how we take care of those that are in most need and less fortunate. And so we do our best to try to meet these people on their level to be able to provide them the help that they need as well. I don't have a slide for it, but 5 years ago, or maybe even more, we launched the first in the state of Michigan. It was a co-responder model for opioid overdoses. And so, we partnered with Access again back then. And when we had an opioid overdose in our city, we would follow up the next day at the hospital, at the hotel, or the home to try to get these people enrolled in substance abuse programs. And it was, again, the officer stands in the background and we allow the substance abuse coach to try to get these people the help that they need. And sometimes they're interested. Sometimes they're not. We use that opportunity to train family members with Narcan and drop that off. I mean, what drives us here in the city of Dearborn is the sanctity of life. And that is really at the forefront of all the things that we do, whether it is dealing with a hostile situation or non-hostile. If the sanctity of life is kind of at the forefront of what you do, I think you respond a little bit differently. So, that's kind of in a nutshell, some of the things that we're doing here. I'm sure I forgot more than I can remember, but I look forward to some of your questions. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk with everyone today. And that's it. Thanks.
This is Charles speaking. Thank you, Chief Shaheen, for your informative and candid presentation. We are hopeful in hearing of your department's efforts in making life better for those living in and traveling through Dearborn. And I just want to remind everyone, there will be the Q&A portion after all the panelists have presented. So looking forward to that. Now we will be hearing from someone with extensive experience in law enforcement and who will be sharing his perspective as a police chief, as well as his other leadership roles. Please welcome Chief Ricky R. Brown of the Detroit Transit Police Department. Chief Brown has been in law enforcement for over 45 years. Throughout his distinguished career, Chief Brown rose through the ranks of Detroit Police and retired at the rank of commander. Along the way, Chief Brown was assigned to various newsworthy units, such as narcotics, and rose to command through these units. Chief Brown assisted in the creation and implementation of training rookie officers in crime suppression techniques that help significantly reduce crime and restore peace to many communities within the city. Chief Brown holds a Master of Science degree from Eastern Michigan University for Public Safety Emergency Management and is a graduate of EMU School of Police Staff and Command. He is also Vice President of the Metro Detroit chapter of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, or NOBLE, and serves as chairman of the committee established to address police and community reform. He is quoted as saying that you can't solve community law enforcement issues without both sides coming together to work at solutions that could actually help prevent loss of life and improve the quality of life for many. Chief Brown, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chief Ricky Brown, also VP of NOBLE, as Mr. Schroeder said. And I want to start off by personally thanking Mr. Schroeder, who I also met at ALPAC, and look forward to working with him and all the members of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I also want to thank Chief Shaheen for his very colorful and well-presented session. I apologize, I don't have the beautiful PowerPoint presentation, so you're just going to have to sit and listen to me. I'd like to start off by saying a lot of what I'm going to say will tie in near the end of my presentation. However, I personally believe, and I strongly believe, that we're all products of our life's experiences. I like to think that many experiences have made, the many experiences I've had have made me the police officer and now the leader that I am now. I would like to use myself as a perfect example of life experiences that can affect anyone's psychological well-being, whether you're aware of it at the time or not. Things are captured in your mind, and it may take years, if ever, for them to manifest into how you treat yourself first and others more important. I like to share several events that occurred in my lifetime. And like I said, they will it'll culminate at the end and you'll understand. Historically, things have a profound effect on individuals. I grew up on the east side of Detroit, two-family flat. And my family, God thankful, my mother and father raised myself and my two siblings in the upper flat. My grandmother and aunties lived in the lower flat. Back then, things were a lot simpler, a lot easier. I grew up where at 8 years old, I can run up and down the street with all my friends. Forrest Gump had nothing on us because we ran everywhere. But at the time, especially during the summer, the neighbors would be out on the porch, especially the older neighbors. And we as children knew how to behave. And when we did cross that line in front of a neighbor, they would chastise us. And after they chastised us, they would notify our parents. So we got a double whammy each time. But at the same time, we respected them. We didn't talk back, and we learned from them. I want to use this as a profound experience that I had in July, mid-July, some years ago. Many of you may have not even been born yet, but it had a very, very profound effect on me. I grew up loving playing cops and robbers, cowboy and Indians, and playing army as we did as little kids back then. My mom bought me a set of action figures. They didn't have action; they just stood there. But it was a set of army, and the figures in green were the Americans, and the figures in gray were Germans. And so I would sit there and opt for hours and just use my imagination and play with those toys. And that is profound because an event occurred in July, many years ago in the city of Detroit, 1967. It was during a time when Black communities were ripe for insurrection because of the way they felt they were being treated by law enforcement, police, and the government as a whole. Back then, there were approximately 50 Black police officers on the entire Detroit Police Department. And I say that because one Sunday morning on the west side of Detroit, Detroit police, as they had done many times, raided an after-hours establishment. Well, that particular day, the crowd grew as time went on, and it ended up turning into a riot. And I say that because it started on the west side of the city. However, other communities in other parts of the city started to react the same way by burning and looting. Now, imagine 8 years old, I'm not really aware of what's going on, but in a show of force, after a couple of days of rioting, the government, the city decided, they called in the National Guard and the military. And in a show of force, one of the things they did was they actually marched down neighborhood streets, both sides of the street. Now imagine an 8-year-old who loves Army and everything like that, seeing live Army troops walking down the street. Well, myself and my friends, we were just overjoyed to be that close to real soldiers. So we're walking along with them until all the parents realized and made that profound one statement: get your fanny up on this porch. But that had a very, very profound effect on me. And I say that because a day or so later, I'm running up and down the street, still unaware of what's really going on. And at the corner, I see 3 Black guys, probably in their mid-20s, standing there laughing and joking next to a garage. All of a sudden, the police car pulls up followed by military Jeep. The officers jump out, the military troops jump out. The officers have the guys up against the garage searching them. And the most interesting thing was the fact that the Army troops were standing there with their rifles, with bayonets on them, pointing at the backs of these 3 guys. That has been with me my entire life. I don't know what happened because, of course, as the crowd gathered on the corner to look, all I heard was, "Ricky!" And you know what that meant back then. That meant get my fanny to the house, which I did. But I want to say that was very, very profound experience that I had. And it stuck with me all my life, like I said. The other experience was 10 years old. A year later, we moved to an integrated neighborhood. We were the 3rd Black family on the block. And as kids, we learned to play with each other. We didn't have the biases and the hatred that some adults had and the desire to be separate. We all just enjoyed playing together. I had Jewish friends, Catholic friends, and of course, other Black family on the block. And I share that because I had an experience on a Saturday. My Jewish friends invited me to go to the Jewish Community Center where they had swim practice. And that center is now the Northwest Activity Center, Curtis and Myers. Well, they're in the pool during their practice, and I'm in the bleachers along with many other persons, kids, adults, they're all in there. However, I didn't realize till after the fact, I was the only Black face in the place. So all of a sudden, this lady comes up and asks me why I was there, and I explained I was waiting on my friends to finish practice. She just simply said, well, you can't be here. You have to leave. So 10 years old, who am I? I never talked back to adults. So I got up and I left. So I walked 2 miles to my house. My friends later asked me what happened. I said, well, I was told to leave. And that was the end of that. So fast forward to 19 years old, I am now in the Detroit Police Department, and I graduate. Myself and two of my junior high school friends, best friends, we all become police officers, same time, same class. And then we go out on the streets together. I was assigned to a police precinct that was rather integrated. I shouldn't say integrated. It was more of a place where you had various ethnic groups in various parts of the precinct, and we had to learn to navigate all those groups. There was the Polish, Italian group south of Michigan. There was the African-American families and groups northwest of the precinct. And then southeast of the precinct, there was a heavy Latino Hispanic population. And I say that because my first year as a rookie, the Detroit Police Department was being integrated. And it was being integrated by then newly elected Coleman Young. And we as Black officers and female officers ran into a very, very disdain wall from the entrenched white officers. And it was a very interesting experience. And I thank my experience growing up in an integrated neighborhood that I didn't come in with any biases towards anyone. So I took each individual separately as to how they treated me and how I treated them. So as a rookie, I also had one other experience there that really impressed me. And I don't know if it's the proper term, but positive or negative. I was assigned as a rookie along with other people to stand in front of this bookstore, Michigan Avenue. And the reason we were standing there and assigned to go there was the simple fact that someone in their infinite wisdom decided to open that bookstore, a Nazi bookstore, right in the heart of a Black community, Hispanic community, and other white communities that didn't subscribe to that philosophy. So here I am, myself, a Black officer, along with other Black officers, standing in front of that bookstore because the neighborhood decided to establish a protest. So of course, the city wanted to make sure everything was peaceful. So here I am standing there as the protesters are protesting with their signs. And all of a sudden, the occupants of the bookstore decide they not only want to open the bookstore there, but they want to taunt the protesters. So here I am, behind me, I hear all these hate-filled statements, slogans, and everything towards Hispanics, other white groups, and Black groups. And I'm standing there protecting them and their right to do that. Funny side of that was one of the veteran rookies, we all glanced at each other and it was almost like the same look. Well, let's just step aside for a few minutes and let them go at it, but that wasn't our job. So of course we couldn't do that. But that experience has also stuck with me. So later on down the line, as Mr. Schroeder said, I was assigned to narcotics in the city of Detroit. And it was during the time when crack cocaine and heroin and especially crack was really pushing its way into the communities. And I say that because contrary to popular belief, many of the customers and users of those substances were coming from the suburbs. So as a narcotics officer doing surveillance, we would sit there and we'd watch as white driver or walking comes into a predominantly Black neighborhood. All we had to do was follow them. And lo and behold, they took us right to the dope house. So I say that because once we started raiding those dope houses, I realized that every house had a copy of the movie Scarface. And for those of you who are not familiar with Scarface, it was a movie of a Cuban immigrant who came to the country and became a drug kingpin in Miami. So it was almost like drug dealing 101, a training video for all the people who were selling drugs at the time. And as time progressed, I realized that the entertainment in the houses changed. The dealers started watching and playing video games. And those video games started off with people, you know, shooting aliens. Then all of a sudden they progressed to shooting people. Then the Grand Theft Auto game came into being, and every house had a copy of Grand Theft Auto in it. And all it did is you awarded points for shooting human beings and stealing. So that's the kind of training that a lot of young people were experiencing, because that's all they did for hours and hours. So as commanding officer, eventually of narcotics, I realized the psychological effect on the officers as well as the drug dealers. So to address that, I had to really think about what would be the best way to address those things. After a long period, I rejoined Noble because I kind of slipped off, and I rejoined because of the upheaval that was approaching the community, the recent upheaval and the calls for police reform and police abolishment. They wanted to eliminate police departments. So I rejoined Noble because I wanted to use Noble as a voice to address that issue. And as Mr. Schroeder said, I became chairman of a committee that I established in Noble, Justice in Action. And in that committee, we started working with the Michigan State Police in response to a study by Michigan State University regarding the potential or the perceived disparity in traffic stops of people of color. And so I realized that Noble would be a good place to work with law enforcement departments from the Black perspective, and our historic knowledge and actual involvement in the Black community. We could be a benefit to any law enforcement agency that's pursuing justice. So one of the things I came up with was a 4-pillar approach. First would be recruiting. As Chief Shaheen mentioned, recruiting is very critical, and it's at a critical stage in our country because, let's face it, many people don't even want to go into law enforcement. And so it's an uphill battle for every department to try and recruit that small pie of qualified individuals. And that's the most important thing, because you want to increase your numbers and manpower. One of the worst things you can do as a police department is overlook someone's historical, personal beliefs, biases, or things like that just to increase your numbers. That is something that is very, very scary. And that's something every department has to avoid. So recruiting is extremely important. So I have a member on the committee who was retired ATF, and he was part of the recruiting process for ATF nationally. And one of the things they realized was that you have to go to the areas where you want the talent. You can't expect the talent to come to you. So he would lead his recruiting efforts in historical Black colleges and various neighborhoods, and they put on the presentation to invite people to join with them. So they also had to come up with community services and enticements to get people more interested in joining. And that's one of the things Noble is really pushing. Second was training. And historically, even in my experience training as a young police officer, there's a thing called fleeing felon. Fleeing felon is where you can literally, with the right justification, shoot a fleeing felon. And we all know the results of that now, of shooting anyone, especially if they're running away. But that's still on the books. So that's part of the training things that we need to really, really look at. And again, the other pillar would be discipline. Everyone knows that law enforcement historically would turn a blind eye to officers who were skirting the policies and procedures, violating constitutional rights, and basically falsely arresting people. Those are the things that transparency in every department needs to be apparent. When it comes to discipline, you have to appropriately discipline, but you also have to be transparent to the community that you're willing to discipline someone, an officer. And then the other issue that a lot is spoken about is qualified immunity. A lot of misperception of that is that police departments blanketly have used that to just get away with, no pun intended, murder. However, more departments are now more cognizant of the actual fact that you have to have the justifiable reason to use qualified immunity. It's not just a blanket thing. As I said, shooting someone could be justifiable, but is it justified? That's what we have to look at. And then the last pillar is most important, is community engagement. Community engagement, in my opinion, like was stated earlier, to solve these problems, you have to solve them from both sides of the coin, not just one. You have to take away the excuses. We've met with the governor's office, the attorney general office. And one of the first things I say, let's take away the excuses in the community. Let's have proper education. Let's have proper employment incentives. Let's have proper recruiting tools by employers to encourage community members to get involved. So that's the most important thing when it comes to community involvement. So I think my time is getting short. So I want to just say thank you very much again to Mr. Schroeder and the members of MDRC. And I also put my, not mine, but the Noble email in the chat. So we have a lot of work to do ahead of us, but we got to work together to make it happen. Thank you so much.
This is Charles speaking. Thank you, Chief Brown. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, and insight with us. Again, we look forward to questions from the audience later. We're going to welcome our next presenter, who will be sharing a unique perspective, going from being in law enforcement to working with them to combat hate and bias in communities. Please welcome Cynthia Deedle. Cynthia M. Deedle, JD, LLM, joined the civil rights team at Meta as their director and associate general counsel in 2021. The civil rights team helps Meta build policies and products with a civil rights perspective from start to finish. Prior to joining Facebook, she served as the director of civil rights reform at the Matthew Shepard Foundation for 4 years and led their national hate crime enforcement training program for law enforcement officers and prosecutors. Deedle retired as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation after serving for 22 years specializing in civil rights, particularly in the field of hate crimes, police abuse and misconduct, community outreach, and victims' rights. She spent 10 years in the New York division working in the civil rights program and served as the lead investigative agent for many high-profile police brutality and hate crime cases. Following the events on September 11, 2001, Deedle volunteered to lead the FBI's efforts to assist the families who were impacted by the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. In 2007, Deedle was promoted to a supervisory special agent position in the Civil Rights Unit and was promoted again in 2008 to chief of the Civil Rights Unit in the FBI. She devoted considerable time to managing the FBI's Civil Rights Cold Case Initiative. In 2011, Dietel transferred to the Boston Division to supervise the public corruption and civil rights programs. She finished her career in the Knoxville Division. Cynthia Dietel, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
This is Cynthia speaking. Charles, thank you so much for the invitation to join me today. I've been listening to my colleagues on the panel, and I'm just continually impressed and amazed with all the really great work that law enforcement is doing in communities and policing and guarding communities of color, most notably. So thank you. As Charles said, I work at Meta, formerly known as Facebook, as the director and associate general counsel for their civil rights team. I've been here for a couple of years, and I am very privileged and grateful to work at a company that touches over 3 billion people every day. 3 billion people use at least one of our apps every single day. $400 billion in economic activity is linked to supply chains relying on our platform. There is very few places in the world that is not touched by the global reach of Meta. Now, as you can imagine, a company with that much reach and with that much power must use that power responsibly, especially when it comes to marginalized communities. A couple of years ago, after an audit that was conducted by Laura Murphy with the ACLU, Mr. Zuckerberg and Meta decided to establish the civil rights team. We're a team of about a dozen people, all with civil rights backgrounds. There are 8 of us that are women of color, and we all have, I think, over 125 years experience in the space. But our task is pretty big. It's a pretty large responsibility. What we try to do more than anything else, our North Star and guiding principle, is to make sure that Meta's ability to impact civil rights is done in a responsible way, that we lead by making sure that we protect marginalized communities. We are the only tech company that has a vice president in charge of our civil rights team. We're extremely proud of that. But we also hope that we're not going to be the only one. We want other tech companies, we want other global corporations to follow Meta's lead and have and staff a civil rights team. Our priorities they're pretty large, they're pretty big. We want to make sure that we create equitable policies and practices and products for everyone. We want to protect voice, especially in marginalized communities. We want to reduce any potential harm that we could create. And we want to be able to lead on product and technology, governance, enforcement, voting, and civic engagement. We do a lot. What I've been tasked to do, what I feel extremely grateful, is I lead their law enforcement and curbing hate pillar. And what I do there is I make sure that, in short, civil rights are protected. And what does that mean? I think we all know, especially if you are following Charles and the really great work of the Michigan Civil Rights Department, you kind of know what civil rights are, right? They're rights that people have to be free from unfair treatment or discrimination or prejudice. And we protect everybody, but especially those who identify as belonging to a marginalized community. Race, ethnicity, color, national origin, these are all protected characteristics that might place somebody in a marginalized class. Those really are, I feel like those are my clients. Those are people that we really are trying to protect. Marginalized communities, what we think of as a marginalized community is a group of people that have been historically and systemically marginalized, pushed to the periphery of society. They've experienced exclusion, discrimination, and unequal power relationships. Again, those are what I consider our clients. So in the law enforcement and curbing hate pillar, it's really two focuses that I have there. One is our hate crime training, and I'll talk about that. And the second thing is working with law enforcement to make sure that they uplift and support their marginalized communities, especially when they use social media. I want to make sure that law enforcement understands our terms of service and our community standards prohibit fake or inauthentic accounts. So I'll break that down in a couple minutes and talk about both of those things. I'll first start with hate crime training. I started this hate crime training back in 2018 with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law and the civil rights attorneys that work there. And what we do is we train police departments. We've now hit, oh boy, a couple of dozen police departments and cities. We've trained well over 1,000 law enforcement officials and prosecutors to understand their state hate crime laws, federal hate crime laws, how to identify, investigate, prosecute hate crimes. And more importantly, I think, is how to work with their communities, especially their marginalized communities, to build those trusting relationships. And you've heard from the prior panelists about how law enforcement is doing that. I'm extremely impressed by what I heard this morning. So, but one of probably the biggest, well, I think the most popular, where we really get the most favorable reviews on the training, is we bring in survivors of hate. We bring in people who have been impacted by hate to talk to law enforcement about what they do right, what they really did right with them when they were having the worst day of their lives, and what maybe there were some areas for improvement. People like Susan Grove, who lost her daughter Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, the Jabara family, who lost College Jabara in a vicious hate crime in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We bring in Dennis and Judy Shepard, who lost their son Matthew in Wyoming in 1998. So we have a whole cadre of families and people that were impacted by racial violence, anti-LGBTQ violence, violence against Muslims. Again, to talk to law enforcement about their experience, what law enforcement did right, and where they could improve. The other thing that we teach law enforcement is, if you have a hate crime in the community and it's pretty high profile, what is your statement to the press? What is the first statement you make on CNN? Hopefully that first statement is something
Hi, this is Charles speaking. Oh, that's unfortunate. It seems as though,
outside of Atlanta.
oh, there we go.
Am I still back? Okay, did I cut out for a minute?
You froze up for just a moment, but we can hear you now.
Okay, I'll go back just 1 second then. So one of the things that we teach is, what is law enforcement's first statement to the press when a hate crime has been committed? If you recall, after the horrific anti-Asian hate crime outside of Atlanta a couple of years ago, the law enforcement official who was the first one on the scene to give a statement to the press said on national TV, on social media, that the perpetrator just had a bad day, and then began to defend his actions. It's horrific. We try to tell law enforcement the best thing to do is just acknowledge that you see the bias motivating indicators. You see the swastika on the synagogue. You see and you heard the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric during the robbery, things like that. Acknowledge what you see, it will build that trust in the community. Secondly, I want to talk about our work with law enforcement to discourage them from opening and operating fake or inauthentic accounts on Facebook or Instagram. It is against our terms of service. It's against the community standards to open and operate a fake account, an account that is created not in your own identification or persona, but in a fake, made-up person. especially if law enforcement creates a persona like that to surveil a marginalized community. The NAACP recently sued the Minneapolis Police Department for alleged social media surveillance of Black Lives Matter shortly after George Floyd's murder. That's exactly what we want to prohibit. We don't want any law enforcement agency to use Facebook inauthentically in a way that is going to chill the free speech and the voice of the people that they serve, especially marginalized communities. I can stop there if you need to take over, Mitch. Okay, thank you. Okay. And the last thing I'll touch upon, and then I'll cede the floor to another panelist, is our encouragement, our promotion of what we think of as ethical use of social media by law enforcement. We want law enforcement to highlight all the really good work that they're doing in communities. Put that on your Facebook page. If you have coffee with a cop, if you're playing basketball with the third grade, put that on your Facebook and Instagram pages. Trust me, the communities are watching. They don't just want to see pictures of car crashes, traffic jams. That's not always what they want to see. They want to see themselves represented in their pages. The other thing that I would say is pay attention to your demographics. If you are a police chief and you are guarding a community where your Black population, for example, is 15% of your demographic, so 15% of your population is Black, yet you put pictures of Black suspects on your Facebook page 60% of the time, that's a problem. That's a problem. We don't want to encourage that type of social media posting and content. We want you to pay attention to your demographic. Pay attention to the pictures of the suspects you are posting on your Facebook pages. And also make sure if you do that, you're right. We've seen recently, after some high profile, sadly, mass murders, the pictures of the alleged perpetrators are wrong. Please make sure that when you use social media, you use it in a way that is ethical, that is fair, and that is promoting all the good work with your communities. I will stay, and of course, for any questions at the end and for the chats, but I do want to allow time for other panelists to weigh in. So with that, I will turn it back over to Charles. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Cynthia. What a remarkable career of service you've had, and we appreciate your continued work to combat hate. I would just like to remind our viewing audience once again that all presenters will be available for questions at the end of the program. Finally, last but not least, please welcome Captain James Grady. Captain Grady is a 25-year member of the Michigan State Police and is currently assigned as commander of the training division. The training division is responsible for providing the basic law enforcement academy for troopers, motor carrier, and state capitol security officer recruits. The division is also responsible for the agency's field training program, precision driving unit, and training academy campus facilities. He has held multiple assignments over the course of his career, including trooper at the Adrian and Detroit posts, detective trooper at the MSP Violent Crimes Investigative Section, assigned out to the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Apprehension Task Force, sergeant at the Detroit and Metro Post, detective sergeant at the Metro Post, lieutenant and inspector at the Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division, detective first lieutenant at the Fraud Investigative Section, and first lieutenant at the Metro South Post. Wow. Captain Grady is an EMU graduate with a BS in Criminal Justice and Criminology and is currently pursuing a master's degree in Business Administration. He is a member of several law enforcement professional, training, and community organizations. Captain Grady is from the city of Inkster, currently resides in Wayne County, and is married to a magnificent woman with whom he shares the responsibility of raising 4 wonderful children. He strongly advocates leadership, community service, and coaching and mentoring, giving back as a volunteer high school track and field coach to motivate and develop young men and women. Captain Grady, we look forward to hearing your presentation, and we appreciate your time here this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for having me this afternoon. I'm in a very optimistic mood right now, having just finished a graduation ceremony for our 26th Motor Carrier Officer Recruit School here in Lansing. So it's wonderful to see these young men, in this case, they're all men, be able to go out and continue to provide service and keeping our roads safe. Today, I want to cover a presentation about the Michigan State Police and some of our recruiting, training, and beyond with hate crime and response. It's been a wonderful and very honorable opportunity to be able to serve as a training division commander and make some changes in our training. I will tell you today's key objectives that I'd like to touch on is, exactly that, what we're doing as far as modern police agency, why are we doing this, and how will the training and efforts impact the future of MSP and the law enforcement profession. Just to address the challenge is one of the things that our agency has been interested in doing really since I've been in over the course of my career. I think it's clearly evident that multiculturalism is rapidly expanding within American communities, and that includes here in the state of Michigan. And the lack of cross-cultural leadership has led to some increased societal conflict. I mean, we've seen that via the social media, through news, and countrywide. Continued education is what we believe at MSP will provide that effective interaction and communication with citizens from diverse backgrounds that's very necessary to have some success and to be able to change the culture with law enforcement or policing. And the Michigan State Police has increased its efforts. We, first of all, started off by putting a lot of the things that we observed, the lack of training with cultural competency, any and everything dealing with hate and bias. I'm going to touch on that in just a moment, but we've increased those efforts over the last 4 or 5 years in the following areas. So policy change, those are things that, the people that we serve, they've been asking for that. So we've made changes to our policy, and we want to make sure that we improve as a department and we modernize our training. You can't do that without policy change. We've embedded community engagement and core training curriculum. As far as bias and cultural competency training, that's being provided at the beginning of your career in the recruit school, which I'll touch on in just a moment, but also throughout the remainder of your career in the MSP. And then last but not least, we are making a very strong effort to make sure that we increase diversity, equity, and inclusion within our department. So I can tell you, when you start talking about policy change, the first thing that comes to mind for me within our department is when you start talking about bias. The department clearly acknowledges that one of its primary functions is to provide fair and impartial public safety services. So with that, all members are expected and actually shall provide service and enforce the law in a professional, non-discriminatory, just, and equitable manner. Members are expected to act, speak, and conduct themselves in a manner that treats others with courtesy and respect. I don't see how you can have success without it. And all members are expected to share responsibility for preventing bias. So if you see it, you have that responsibility in the state police to prevent it. As far as training goes in this agency, when you talk about hate and bias, we started probably about 2015, 2016 with implicit bias training. Our enlisted command staff received it first. Then our first line supervision, as well as followed by our troopers, our motor carrier officers, and then our Capitol security officers. But we didn't want to stop there. Equally important is we thought it was important to provide this to our civilian staff, our non-uniform staff as well, whether they were at a director level position like mine, if they were middle management and or staff. And so with this, it was called fair and impartial policing. It was actually provided to our agency through them, and then we made sure that we have staff trained in it. That includes myself. And with that, we basically wanted to make sure that our staff in the MSP had the knowledge of the meaning of bias. More importantly, the difference between implicit and explicit bias. We wanted to ensure that they were clearly aware that this is their science and research to support implicit bias in the behaviors. The training provides tons of examples. A lot of time, the instructors like myself, I'm able to give some personal examples as well. The training touches on stereotypes and how that affects, each individual and performing their day-to-day roles and responsibilities, whether they are civilian or enlisted. And we want each individual in our department to make sure that they are able to clearly recognize their biases. While it's natural, everyone has biases. We want to make sure that you have the ability to understand, again, what the word bias means. Even if you have no ill intention to be offensive or to hurt someone based on what you say or maybe how you think about different things, it's important for you to know the difference, be willing to accept some feedback from other people when they tell you that they are offended, and more importantly, be able to make the change as an individual. I think everybody should be doing that, whether they are involved in the policing profession or not. I think that I think our efforts like this would clearly make not only the state of Michigan a better place to live, but the United States as a whole. But the training itself provides an overall awareness. And the original training, again, was provided by Fair and Impartial Policing to all departmental members. And it's been an honor to provide that instruction. There's been some great dialogue. The feedback is about 50-50. I think there's still some membership that feel a certain way. I think that, you can see in the different articles that you read when it comes to implicit bias that some folks aren't accepting of it, or they disagree, or they feel like they're being personally attacked. We have some of the same opinions here with the state police, but nevertheless, the training is important and we have to provide it. I just don't see how you can not provide that type of training in this day and age. And I think overall it will be beneficial as we move forward in the future. But in addition to that, since I've been a division commander, and it was already a part of our strategic direction, the Cultural Awareness and Diversity Speaking Series is provided for our recruit classes. This started shortly after I promoted here back in 2020. I still want to give a lot of kudos and thank yous to the Michigan Roundtable and Mr. Steve Spritzer, because he was able to get me some speakers and get this started. So what we do is MSP, again, is putting forth all of the effort that we can to improve our cultural competency within the agency. So we have an African-American speaker, Hispanic Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, Indian, Native American, Arabic, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, the LGBTQIA+, the disabled persons. We have a representative. Actually, we've had the Warriors on Wheels from the Detroit metropolitan area come in and provide a presentation to the recruits. And here recently, now that we'd had COVID is not going, but it subsided a little bit, we've been able to provide in this current recruit school for troopers and motor carrier officers the opportunity to attend tours for museums, which they just recently did at the Arab American National Museum. And here on the 7th of June, they will be attending the African American History Museum in the city of Detroit. They've also attended a mosque to be able to tour a mosque there in Dearborn. A lot comes from that, right? Every recruit school, myself and my staff, we conduct an opportunity to debrief with the recruits. We get a lot of wonderful feedback. I like to think people have the opportunity in their lifetime to, if they could, to live in a very diverse area. Me coming from Wayne County, I've had the opportunity to do that. So I've seen quite a bit, even though I tell recruits, and I think we'd all agree you'll never know it all. But what it does is it gives each recruit the opportunity to be exposed to something different and then receive an education at the same time. There's a lot of great dialogue that takes place. And what I'm hoping and what the goal is coming out of this is to make sure that in the future, we start to change the culture a little bit within the agency. MSP is very traditional, very proud department, but we're always looking for ways to better ourselves here in the MSP. And I really think that this would be a great way to, again, expose the recruits to something different so that when they get out and they complete the recruit school, they can have success in the field. First of all, you can help erase some of those fears. Some of the stereotypes, things that you may have had questions about, but was really afraid to ask other people those questions because you didn't want to come off offensive. Well, it gives each recruit that opportunity or that platform to be able to ask those challenging or difficult questions and receive some very valid and credible feedback from the speakers. So that's been of great success. I will tell you some of the things that we cover during these speaker series. I make sure that each speaker, after I vet them, they cover the history and origin of that culture. They talk about the assimilation into American society if they have family, or they talk about immigrants that immigrate to this country and then to the state of Michigan, and if and why they fear law enforcement. They talk about racial and discrimination challenges, offensive terms, things like that. They cover culture, family values, education, food, dance, religion, music. They touch on each one of those components, and they, at my request, talk about past and current relationship with law enforcement. I want to know from each speaker, and it gives the recruits to ask the question as well, how can MSP improve the relationship? We want to make sure, again, we reduce bias, and that could include individual or personnel from our own agency. And this is how you do it, I think, is through education. So we ask also, what are the expectations when engaging with law enforcement, from those individual cultures? And how can we recruit in those communities? Law enforcement, there's been I should say in policing, there's been some difficulty and challenges with recruiting. We're doing everything that we can. Things have changed quite a bit over the course of my 25 years in policing. And you really have to be intentional if you want to make sure that you have a diverse agency, and you have to be aggressive. You can't sit back and think that people are going to come to you. You got to get out there and look for them and then let them know that you want them. And I do find that it is very interesting that, again, it's not just in Michigan, it's not just our agency, this is across the board. I haven't had the opportunity last summer to attend a SPAS conference, which deals with command officers and staff that are involved in police training, just like me. And this was all state police agencies, and there were probably about half the country represented at that conference, and we all had the exact same problems. So it's interesting to have those conversations, but even though the state police has statewide jurisdiction, it's a large area to cover. We still have to do our part to make sure that we have a very diverse department because it is only going to make our community relations better and provide that opportunity and benefit to having success. And last but not least, the other thing that we offer the recruits the opportunity is just simply have to ask those questions again and establish some dialogue throughout the presentation. The other thing that we are doing in the recruit school, some other training that we are providing now, again, to help eliminate some of the bias out there, and this is both ways. So in 2022, towards the end of the year during the winter, we made a request for residents here in the state of Michigan to come out and help us with recruit training, with our basic training. So we extended that offer to come on out and serve as actors. We have, some diversity in the department, and we try to schedule that when we are having actors or civilians and/or enlisted personnel participate in recruit training where they are serving as actors. Sometimes that could be difficult. I thought that bringing in the residents in the state of Michigan, giving them that opportunity would work for us and be beneficial in a couple of different ways. One, the recruits will get that exposure to stop somebody that looks a little bit different from them, maybe come from a different area, because diversity means a lot of different things. And at the same time, it would also give the residents here in Michigan an opportunity to see how we train, maybe why we ask the questions that we do on a traffic stop, and for more importantly, so that they can see that the state police are doing everything that we can to make sure that our staff is trained and understand the importance of respect and dignity whenever engaging or interacting with a resident and providing service. The actors do receive training. We make sure that the training is roughly 2 hours. There's some legal covered. There's some of our tactics that are covered. We give them an opportunity to ask questions. And last but not least, after the scenario training is conducted for the day, we will debrief with them and ask them, is there anything that we can do better? And very similar to the Cultural Awareness and Diversity Speaking Series, it's been a lot of good feedback. The recruits enjoy it a lot, but equally the residents from the state of Michigan, and we do get them from across the state, they actually have enjoyed it as well. So it's been very successful. And again, it gives us the opportunity to continue to build that rapport, bridge that gap with Michigan communities across the state. Some additional training that recruits receive, we have a Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer here at MSP. Inspector Krebs will provide cultural awareness, some other types of training dealing with bias and hate to the recruits. And at the same time, Dr. Liebler, who is a part of our Professional Development Bureau, the bureau that I'm a part of, she comes in and she provides cultural poverty training to the recruits as well. And so then when the recruits graduate, we provide what we call in-service training. And that's all post-academy training over the course of their career. At this point, what we provided so far is the history of police and race. I also provide instruction on that course. So the course is about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, but it basically covers the history of police and race and that interaction over the years in this country is not specific to the state of Michigan. It involves policing as a whole, going all the way back. But it gives me an opportunity as an instructor just to let staff know that it's important for them to know that, even though they might not like it. And we do get some individuals that don't care for it as much, but most are willing to listen because you can't change the history. The history is what it is. The important part is that you know it. because we are still dealing with some of the same issues and concerns that we had many years ago. So if you know it, then you can start working on changing it. Different things like historical cases with Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, those type of very critical and significant court cases are covered in this course, along with many other things, right? You know, why are we seen as being bad or good? What can we do to change it? Other things like such as generational wealth, redlining, things like that are all covered in this course. But more importantly, what I like out of the course is the opportunity to establish the dialogue with our staff. This gives people an opportunity to express their opinion in a safe place and us to be able to talk about it. Because it's often, when you start talking about subjects like this, it's almost like the elephant in the room. People don't want to touch on it because they're, you know, it's kind of a hot topic. And it's good for us to establish that dialogue and then continue it throughout the course so that we can actually see how other people feel, see what their opinions are and why. De-escalation training is another area that we've covered. I think that's a staple right now for police training, as it should be. A duty to intervene as well. Both those types of training is being provided to everybody. It is mandatory training for us here at the state police. And last but not least, another area of training that we've covered here over the last couple of years is police and public perception. That was a course that was designed by where we partnered with the University of Michigan in Dearborn, where they had different speakers come in, very similar to the cultural awareness and diversity speaking series that the recruits receive. And they covered a lot of the same material. It was just provided for our in-service. So people that are currently in the agency that have already been in, these are not recruits. And so we had about 100 members trained over that 6-week period. And, you know, we had some really good speakers covering some very significant information during that time frame. Diversity, equity, inclusion. I will tell you one of the things that has helped us here, and we're starting to see the benefit here with the state police as we understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion is our employee resource groups. So at this time, we have an Asian Pacific Islander ERG, an African American, a Women's Leading Change, a military veterans ERG, a Pride ERG, and Diverse Abilities ERG. I am a member of a couple of these ERGs, and what I see already is, you know, plans to help on recruiting and retention of staff here. It can assist with onboarding people that come into the agency. And again, you have to be aggressive and intentional in your recruiting efforts. You have to use your staff. I'm a firm believer that your primary resource are the people that work for you, work in your agency or organization. So we are taking advantage of that here at the MSP and trying to use those groups as well as everybody else in the agency to recruit people to backfill in for our attrition, because we are having quite a few members begin to retire. This also gives us an opportunity to go out and engage with the community. Whether you go work in the soup kitchen, you participate in other you know, speaking engagements, you meet with the leaders. Here in the MSP, we had already been doing, you know, quite a few things, such as, you know, making sure that we sit on the ALPAC meetings across the state. We are constantly and consistently doing something with the public as far as raising food or fundraising drives, trying to collect food, clothing, coat drives, you name it, we're doing it here in MSP and across the state. I just heard the speaker before me talk about basketball with a cop. We've been involved with that for years now within the department. And these are all very positive interactions with the community. And they do have a benefit. I'll cover real briefly. When I was at Metro South as a post commander there, we went into Inkster, my hometown, and actually did a basketball with a cop day. It was a great event, a lot of positive engagement, but both the youth and the parents. I can tell you historically, it wasn't the relationship between police and that community hasn't always been good, and for various reasons. But after that particular event, within a day or two, some troops pursued a stolen vehicle in the same area. And we actually have people from the community call into the front desk of the post and tell our desk sergeant who it was. So again, you can't have the success that you need out here without the community. So it's just that much more important as we are continuing our safe city patrols throughout the state of Michigan to make sure that we establish a strong rapport. And you can't do that without having the background of cultural competency training and making sure that you cover hate and bias so that people know where they are, where they stand, where we stand as an agency and expectations of the community. But to me, this is all modern training. Everything that I've been covering thus far, this is modern police training. And I believe, based on my interaction with the public, that this is expected and supported by the people that we serve. Annual and continued education for law enforcement is critical. It helps to create opportunities for critical thinking, for improved professional self-regulation, decision-making when you have this type of training. It also assists with problem solving and proper analysis of various outcomes when you're out there working as a law enforcement or police officer. Annual continuing education is geared towards interpersonal skills. You need those interpersonal skills. I tell every recruit, you'll receive a gun belt, you'll receive other types of tools, but none or nothing is more important than your ability to engage, interact appropriately, and communicate with the people that you serve. So with all of this, you will receive the enhanced community support. You will improve as an officer. It'll also improve the potential for de-escalation for hostile events because you will have that training and background. You can walk into a situation because you've been exposed and had that education, and you're aware of cultural competency and the importance of it. Therefore, you don't offend people. So it's a huge benefit to be able to provide this training, and it's critical for the profession. Just to touch real quickly or briefly on response to hate crime. So for those of you that are on the forum that aren't aware, oftentimes the state police are mistaken for being highway patrol, and we're not. We're a full service agency. Today I'll be able to provide a little bit of statistical data. So from our Criminal Justice Information Center, there were about 5,214 bias motivated incidents from 2013 to 2022. About 6,032 reported victims by bias motivation from 2013 to 2022. And this includes race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, disability, and law enforcement, and actually prevention and enforcement as well. So we're doing all of these things here with the MSP. When you start talking about prevention, we have community service troopers that go out and interact with the youth in different communities. And we talk about things like bullying, which is hate. We talk about bias. And then on the enforcement side, again, we're not just on the freeway or highways. We are investigators. We're very well-trained investigators. And when it comes to enforcement, we will take your hate crime complaint and investigate it and do a very good job of it, and then send it over to the prosecutor's office for review. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I want to thank you for listening. I do want to throw out there real briefly that we are hiring trooper and civilian positions. Just go to www.michigan.gov/MSP. And again, thank you for listening in today's forum.
This is Charles speaking. Thank you, Captain Grady. The information you shared about what training and development looks like at MSP was informative and appreciated. We are encouraged and hopeful in your leadership and influence on those recruits. I will definitely be checking in with you to hear about your progress. We've now arrived at our question and answer portion of the program. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And at this time, I'm going to ask all our panelists to turn on their cameras as we will begin taking questions. As a quick reminder, please remember to state your name before proceeding to speak. And we will now open the floor. And I've been monitoring the Q&A chat with my colleagues, and I know we have quite a few questions in there. And I notice, I think about half a dozen or so are directed to Dearborn PD. So as they come on screen, I'll also ask that they provide their email address. So if any of the answers aren't as detailed as the viewing audience would like, if you could provide your email for follow-up to reach the department for more elaborate answers. But I'll go to the first question. Yes, this is being recorded and will be available, as all of our monthly sessions are available regarding our My Response to Hate campaign. And you can find those at our website on www.michigan, and Michigan is spelled out, .gov, and that's /MDCR. So thank you for the question. And the next series of questions, again, I believe these were sent in after the chief's presentation from Dearborn. And it's what training do officers have to identify mental health concerns? And an additional question, what mental health support is provided to officers who experience trauma in performing their jobs? So I know, Chief Shaheen, you had mentioned mental health. So it's two component. One, in your officer's ability to deal with mental health concerns, and then that of their own mental health.
So to answer the first part of that, Issa Shaheen speaking, to answer the first part of that question, Charles, our officers, and Captain Grady kind of touched on it, it's similar to the state police. So they receive quite a bit of training in the academy. Then when we hire a new police officer, we have 2 weeks of in-house training, and they'll receive kind of in-depth training on recognizing people suffering mental health crises, autism training, people with special needs training. And then one of the really great things about having a clinician on staff 24 hours, or 40 hours a week, is that in addition to serving the community, she serves our department. And so she provides in-depth around the year training to officers on how best to deal with people suffering a mental health episode. And then when there's a best practice, she's able to kind of employ that training to our officers. And then finally, one of the other things that officers do quite regularly is they have to file petition paperwork with the courts when we find ourselves having to petition someone who is either a danger to themselves or others. And so she provides a lot of training surrounding that paperwork to make sure that it's being completed properly. So that handles that piece. Now, the internal side, I've been on the job for 25 years now, and I'm sure my colleagues, Chief Brown and Captain Grady, can speak to this. When we first came on the job, it was very different for officers in crisis and how we handled it. And I'm proud to say that there's been a real renaissance in that area over the years. And so we have, and I'm sure the other agencies can speak to it, an EAP program. But several years ago, our own very officers applied for a grant that created a very robust peer-to-peer program. And so, one of the things that you find when officers have issues is they have a hard time talking to people, first of all, and then people especially that are not from the law enforcement community. And so that peer-to-peer program, we have specially trained officers that are here to help other officers in crisis. And so, they get training to how to kind of navigate officers' issues, and they know where they need to hand it off then to a professional. But, when we have a critical incident in our agency, our peer-to-peer team, meaning those officers who are specially trained, will come to the station to provide support for their fellow officers. Oh, and one other, not to jump back to the previous part, but we also have critical incident trained officers that have additional training on how to handle critical incidents. It's kind of a national standard. We have a team of officers that have that training as well. I apologize. But yeah, policing is never getting easier. It's getting harder every day. And, it's nice to know that our officers can be there for each other as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief Shaheen. And again, I don't want to just specifically look to Dearborn for these answers. There is a question that says, have you seen a decrease in police misconduct? And, you know, maybe if we circle back to Captain Grady, whereas you have a recruit or somebody under your leadership, that you get information that they've exhibited a bias or hate to a community or person that they'll be dealing with you know, their public interaction, but also within the organization. If you were to be informed of something like that, what steps would you take? What response would you make?
Well, I can tell you in the Michigan State Police Recruit School, that's a situation once brought to my staff or my attention. We'll conduct an investigation for that because we want to make sure, is this a one-time incident? Has this happened several times? Maybe this was something missed in the background investigation. I think that a lot of people tend to think that just because a background investigation is conducted that you can't miss something. I like to think that not only MSP, but a lot of law enforcement agencies or policing agencies do their best in trying to do a thorough background, but things can be missed. And in a situation like that, we are not tolerant of it. Again, we will initiate an investigation, investigate it thoroughly, and then figure out next steps from there. And that next step could mean removal from the recruit school, if that's what it takes. Very similar to Dearborn, as the chief was saying, we do have an Office of Behavioral Science with MSP as well. So we won't fall short of including our staff from OBS to get involved with a situation like that as well, including our human resources department. So we will throw the table at a situation like that and figure out what action steps to take best. But if it's clearly something that's egregious, you know, those biases, or they clearly have shown the ability to want to have hate, we can't have that in our law enforcement and our policing agency. So we will remove them if it takes that after a completed investigation.
Thank you, Captain Grady. I appreciate it. So again, this is a question for all of you, those currently in law enforcement, and I know Cynthia's formerly in law enforcement and yet works with them all of the time. What type of trends are you seeing from your experience? Have you seen a decrease in police misconduct?
I'm happy to try to answer that one. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, for many departments, there is very little transparency on their complaints, allegations, lawsuits, reports of misconduct, excessive force, corruption. It's really hard to tell. So I think it's always going to be a challenge for those of us watching law enforcement to know what the trends are, to see, is the training working? Are departments reporting out their numbers, and are they being transparent with allegations? It's hard. I wish that departments were as progressive as and forward thinking as those on this call today, to really be transparent and lead with an openness to sharing information.
Thank you for that, Cynthia. And again, back to the heart of the topic of this conversation. I mean, police legitimacy through procedural justice. And I often feel like we're at the, we're at the other end of the spectrum, perpetually trying to fix the problems that we may be creating by not having that open and transparent process for looking at that info and addressing these issues. Again, so there's more questions for Dearborn. What additional resources or wish list would you have to enhance your department? How many officers in Dearborn are bilingual? And do you find that the police workforce is aging? And are you seeing recruitment of younger officers increase? So maybe the quicker question: how many officers in Dearborn are bilingual? Do you know that, Chief?
You know, we do track that information. You know, let me share this with you. I started in 1998, and at that point we had almost 200 officers, and I was one of 5 Arabic speaking officers. I know bilingual goes beyond Arabic and Spanish and Portuguese and a whole host of languages, but I'll just focus on Arabic considering our demographic here in town. So there was 5 of us, and if we had to rely on my Arabic to get us by, we're in trouble. So I'm happy to say that while there was 5 of us when I started in 1998, I've got about 23 Arab American officers on the department now. I've been the chief for about 1.5 years. I've hired 15 officers, and 10 of them have been Arab American, and the majority of them not only speak Arabic, but they read and write it as well. I'll tell you one kind of new thing I can tell you a new trend for me, is policing has become more attractive to the Arab American community since, I was a young man. And I have hired a number of Arab Americans that weren't born in the United States, that have immigrated to this country, have gotten citizenship, and have worked extremely hard to, educate themselves, get to go to college, and they're some of our best officers. But diversity is extremely important. One of the most important things that a chief of police can do, there's 2 things: who he hires and who he promotes. And I firmly believe that you should have a police department that is a mirror reflection of the community that you serve. And so African-American and women in law enforcement and all backgrounds make us a better, well-positioned police department to be able to serve our community. What other questions do you have, Charles? I don't want to drone on about the same.
Yeah, so this could be presented to everyone, and I'll combine them. So it talks about wish lists, and then there's a question about recruitment. Are you seeing the workforce is aging, and are you seeing younger recruitment of younger officers? I know Captain Grady is, because he's just getting out of a graduation and mentioned, and we've talked about that in the past, but would that be part of your wish list, more recruits to the department?
I'm in a unique situation, Charles. Issa Shane speaking. I mean, I literally have 3 positions. I mean, the workforce always ages. We're always getting young kids that keep looking younger and younger as I get older. But we're doing relatively well from a recruiting standpoint. I'm proud to say that. One thing I want to jump back towards, and Cynthia kind of touched on it when we talked about transparency. When I talked about transparency and accountability being the building blocks of building trust, we put our use of force on our transparency dashboard. We report out at the end of the year on how many times we use force, how many times we get taser deployments, and our complaints. And I think that's important, so you can measure that data. I'll tell you that, last year alone, we arrested 2,600 people, over almost 2,700. It was almost 3,000 in 2021. So that's 3,000 times, right, that an officer had to say, put your hands behind your back and put you under arrest. Majority of those were probably for minor offenses, but I can assure you there were some violent encounters in there as well among those 3,000. We use force. You could probably count on your hands and toes every year how many times you have to use force, and even fewer taser deployments. There's nothing that erodes the community's trust in law enforcement more than the inappropriate use of force. And so it's important that police departments and leaders in their organizations are holding their men and women accountable, and have and I'm sure the state police does as well. When we have force that is used, there is documentation that goes all the way up to include my signature on that form. So we don't use force without it being reviewed at many levels, and you have to build that accountability in there. Otherwise, you can have issues. So, and then I'll let someone else speak if they'd like.
This is Captain James Grady from the Michigan State Police. As the chief just alluded to, he's correct. MSP does the exact same thing. We have a transparency and accountability page on our website. You can go there. There are a ton of information. Even our official orders, our policies are posted on that page. So, transparency is something that we believe in here at the MSP. And so we're fine. We don't feel like we have anything to hide as a professional policing agency. And it's all listed right there. Going all the way back to 2019, you can see the use of force reports. There are spreadsheets and everything else sitting right there, including how we're recruiting, what our departmental strength looks like as far as personnel, what our recruit schools look like for each recruit going back some years. So all of that information is there. This is something that our leader, Colonel Gasper, made sure that we had intact and for people to be able to review.
Charles speaking. Thank you, Captain Grady and Chief Shaheen. And what I'll do now, just anticipating that there's a potential we may not get to all the questions or answer them to the depth in which participants are looking for. Can you each one by one provide a contact email either for you or your organization where they could follow up? And I'll circle back with you, Captain Grady.
You want us to provide that information verbally
Yeah,
or in the chat?
yeah, the chat won't go to the attendees, so you can just do that verbally.
Okay, so my email address is Grady J, Grady, J as in James, at michigan.gov.
Excellent, thank you. And I see this is Charles speaking. Cynthia's is CMDEITLE at meta.com. Chief Brown.
Yes, sir. Chief Brown speaking.
Can you provide your email or your organizational email if someone wants to follow up?
Certainly, the email for Noble is simply Noble Metro DET@gmail.com. My work email is Brown, BROWN, Ricky, RICKY, all one word, at DetroitMI.gov.
Wonderful, thank you, Chief. And Chief Shaheen, this is Charles speaking. Can you provide contact info for you or your department?
Sure can. So my email is going to be ishahin@dearborn.gov. And I want to say, Captain Grady, you haven't changed in 15 years, man. I remember when we were two sergeants and we worked together in a scout car for a few days collectively, and you look the same, man. I don't know what your secret is.
Is being at these recruit schools with the youth. That's what it is.
Thank you. This is Charles speaking. So get back to the questions in the Q&A. And I guess this is unique for each. Do you have a board that overlooks the police department in the community that are just citizens in the community? So a exclusively citizen-based review board.
So go ahead, Captain Grady.
Okay, this is Captain James Grady from the Michigan State Police. I'll say this real briefly. So we don't, if you're talking about discipline, things of that nature, what I will tell you is that we are working with, like the Colonel started the Bridges to Blue, where we have community leaders from around the state that provide information on how we can better the agency and improve and continue to create a better working rapport and bridging the gap with the communities that we serve across the state. But as far as something dealing with discipline panels that have civilians, that's something that we don't have here at the state police.
Issa Shaheen speaking. So we also do not have civilian oversight or civilian review can mean many things. So do we have civilian police oversight? I would say in your traditional sense, no. But do we interact and involve the community in the way that we do policing on a frequent and regular basis? Absolutely. So, and I'm also looking to, in the near future, launch in itself like a police advisory board that could bring together stakeholders from across the community to include police officers as well, to make sure that we're providing the level of service that our community expects and demands.
This is Chief Brown under my transit police hat. Our agency is actually overseen by a board of appointees for the city. However, we have an MOU where we're also sworn through the Detroit Police Department, which is overseen by a civilian board of Detroit Police Commissioners.
Excellent, thank you all. And I do have a question for Cynthia. Cynthia, this is Charles speaking. Hate groups are known to target and recruit youth online. What work, if any, is being done by Meta to combat this?
This is Cynthia speaking. Thank you, Charles, and thank you for the question. So I want to put into context our work around hate speech. Over 90% of hate speech on Facebook and Instagram is caught by our algorithms and taken down and removed before you ever see it. And I want to really emphasize that over 90% of the hate speech that is attempted to be posted on Facebook or Instagram is removed before you ever see it. That's the first thing. The second thing is we do not allow praise, support, or representation by any user of a designated hate group on Meta, on any Meta platform. So you cannot praise, represent, or support any hate group that is designated by Meta on our platforms. We will not allow it. We will remove that content. We will do everything that our human reviewers and our AI and machine learning can do to remove hate speech and also remove any attempts by a hate group to recruit other members to join the organization. We will not allow it.
Excellent. Thank you, Cynthia. Another question. This is Charles speaking. In what areas do you see officers struggling with bias or isms? Racism, classism, sexism?
I'm sorry, Charles. Issa Sheensky, could you repeat that question?
Sure. Charles speaking. In what areas do you see officers struggling with bias or isms? For example, racism, classism, sexism?
Issa Shaheen speaking. You know, look, I've got I just say it like it is. It's kind of one of my things, and I'll tell you, for me, I think where you really have struggles is the implicit bias, right? You know, there's all these safeguards for, and you know, it's very clear how we should treat each other, but you know, the implicit component, what we do subconsciously when we're interacting with people, is where I think, you know, you really kind of need to pay attention. And so, Charles, you know, we've trained for years for implicit bias. You've even done some of that training over the years. You know, we have had other instructors that have come in to help us train it as well. ABLE training, you know, about active bystander leadership, you know, where officers have a duty to intervene if there should be something that's not appropriate, you know, so they intervene to stop that kind of conduct. We were one of the first departments in the state to train for that. But that implicit bias, you know, and I'll give you a brief example, right? You know, if I should have a white officer that stops, you know, maybe, you know, some drivers, young men driving, and they might be talking back to them in a way that's not appropriate. You know, maybe that officer says himself, you know, I can see myself in these kids, you know, they're just being, you know, rambunctious young men like I was at their age. But do they behave and handle that situation the same way if they're African-American kids or Arab American kids? I mean, it's important that we are treating everyone fairly, equitably, and, you know, policing constitutionally. So I would say that it's an implicit kind of area where you really need to be mindful and train against it.
Thank you, Chief Shaheen. This is Charles speaking. Anyone want to add, or we're ready for next question? Actually, it's not even a question. It says, nice to hear about the focus on DEI at MSP. And does MSP do the history of policing and race training for community organizations too?
This is Captain James Grady from the Michigan State Police. No, we've not branched out outside of the agency. This is fairly new training that's being provided to members within our agency. But again, and I'm an instructor for that, and I'll tell you, it's really good training. More importantly, I think you get a lot of great dialogue out of it. And I think the dialogue is just as important because, again, it's always that elephant in the room topic that needs to be covered. And I think people walk away with some better understanding, you know, and that's always a good thing. It's okay if we disagree on something, but we need to have the conversation about it. And so it's been very good, very productive, I think very beneficial for our agency to do it. But at this juncture, no, we don't provide the training outside of the agency.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. This is Charles speaking, and as we're coming up on the 3 o'clock hour, I know we have two questions. One I can answer, that how will presenter contact info be shared? We've shared that in the Q&A with all of you. And are there national standards or mandates regarding DEI training for officers, or is it at the discretion of each department? Could answer that quickly.
So this is Captain James Grady from the Michigan State Police. I will tell you that Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards for police training is making some of those changes. Now some of this training as far as cultural competency is being added to the training curriculum and is mandatory training. I can't rattle them all off right now, but I will tell you, if you go to their webpage, you can see a list of, what is mandatory here in the state of Michigan. That is the licensing regulatory agency for the state of Michigan for police officers and the certification. So I will tell you there's some mandatory training now added in the curriculum covering this area.
Charles speaking. Thank you, Captain Grady. And as we close, I'd just like to thank each and every one of our panelists. We value your expertise and are grateful for the time and effort it took for you to be here and share with us. I would also like to thank our viewing audience for joining and watching. We would like to welcome all of you back for our next campaign forum, which is scheduled for Thursday, June 22nd, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. The next forum will focus on biases in healthcare. You can learn more about the My Response to Hate campaign by visiting the Michigan Department of Civil Rights website at www.michigan.gov/MDCR, where you can also explore ways to get involved. Please be sure to check out the pledge that is available for download and distribution. And remember, eliminating hate and bias in our state is all of our responsibility. Thank you, everyone, and take good care.
Thank you. Thank you to the interpreters.
Thank you. Have a wonderful